Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Book of the Month. This is our first one of 2026, and we're very excited that the author of this month's book is joining, Margo Boster. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you.
We will dive in a moment. Bret is joining us again for this year, and we always start at the top of the hour. I'm sure he got sidetracked in a meeting that went a little long or something, but if he comes in, we will welcome him in. The purpose of the series is to give leaders an opportunity to engage with ideas and reflect on things that affect how leadership is done in real life. We often say that this is for leaders of tomorrow who invest in themselves today. And so January's book, Mindfully Successful, the subtitle is Unlock the Power of Your Brain, Body, and Breath to Elevate Your Leadership. And I could just go on and on about how those three all tie together. And that's what drew me to the book. And so excited to get to talk with you about it. So I want to share, I'll start with why I picked it up and why it resonated with me was I will joke about how the brain, body, and breath all go together, and somebody ought to research that and tell people. And there is a lot out there, but it really struck me when the last few months I started having lower back pain, and I just felt like it wasn't related to physical activity, and it wasn't, I kind of counted out all these other things, and I will often say it's a mental thing, but brain sounds a lot better because it really was pain. It wasn't psychosomatic, but I felt like there was something, but I didn't know the research to do anything about that really. So I've been a student of breath work for a long time and would try that, but it wasn't quite there. So your book, I felt, did a great job of doing the research and sharing it so normal people can understand it. I don't have an MD, so I could understand the work that you did and shared, and then how you tie it into practical leadership today. And I loved at the beginning, I wrote a page number down somewhere, page 86. You said something about being a leader today is like being a marathoner. Yeah, right? What have you noticed about that?
Well, I think about when you're running a marathon, they say life's a marathon, not a sprint. And a lot of the times leaders will approach leadership as though it's a sprint,
right.
Or they'll only partially prepare. And I'm not a runner, I just know runners. But if you're preparing for a marathon, you start slow, and that you have to have, the endurance, you have to have the right diet, you have to have the physical, the muscular ability. And so you go and you look at it holistically. What do I need to do to run this marathon and be successful at the end, be healthy at the end?
Yeah.
And I think that when we get into leadership, so often there's the immediacy. We've got to do this. We've got to do this. We have to see that. And people approach it very incrementally. And so I wanted to make it in a way that would resonate, that people could understand, oh, I wouldn't just one day think I'm going to run a marathon and get up and do it. And yet that's what too often, or so often, people do as far as being a leader.
In the short term, they run it as sprints. So I have this deadline, so I'll be this kind of leader for this.
Yeah.
And then I have this next deadline or this next issue or the employee challenge and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And by the fifth sprint, they are done.
Yes.
They have nothing left in them. And it is a long endurance sport.
Yeah. And then think how that affects people at home too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an executive coach. Hey, there's Bret joining us.
Bret, welcome.
Hi. Thank you.
We kicked it off already, and we are talking about leadership as a marathon. So
have at it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Margo. You were saying about being the executive coach.
Oh yeah, I'm an executive coach, and it's interesting when I work with my leaders, we're focusing on them in the leadership capacity, and they'll often come back and say, I didn't realize this, but this really affects how I talk to my kid.
Right.
or this affects how I deal with my partner. And it's like, you are a whole person,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have the same with as an executive coach too. And sometimes having that conversation about you're not two different people. You're the same. It's like a stress reliever to relieve the pressure of being somebody different at work as a leader than you are at home.
yeah.
Brett, what was your initial impression or an overall impression of the book?
I really liked it. I thought it was kind of interesting in how it's set up, and particularly as we go into the new year, right? This is one of those things where everybody kind of does that. I'm going to be a new version of myself going into the year, whether it's a New Year's resolution or whatever you want to call it. But it's that one thing that says, okay, am I taking care of my brain? And then am I taking care of my body? And then obviously the last part with the breathing. I mean, who hasn't been told to take a deep breath or slow your breathing down? I mean, those things are kind of table stakes, but obviously I've never been into the physiology part of it the way that, we went into it. But, everybody's heard somebody tell them, hey, just calm down, take a deep breath, it'll be okay. I thought it was very well done.
Margo, when your yoga instructor, Mark, said that, wasn't it? I think it was Mark. Was I about
Mark,
screamed.
yes.
I was
Mark
listening
Stevens.
to that. Oh my God.
I can vividly recall it. And it was at a very stressful time in my life. And I can see I was standing there just really looking for the right book. And when he said, what's the problem? I'm like, he's just breathe. And I swear, I thought I was going to lunge at him. I think he was wearing a pair of red shorts.
Oh my
I
gosh.
was going to lunge at him and so it's funny when, Brett, when you said, when people say calm down, I try to be very careful not to say calm down, because when you're spiraling, the last thing you want to hear is calm down. I am calm, but the thing is, with what I was trying to convey here is a lot of the, I would say all the leaders I work with are so smart. And so most of them want to know, but why does that work? What's behind that?
Right.
Yes, take a breath, but so what? And because I am a little bit of a brain nerd, and I love the science behind all of it. And if I can understand the science, I think that it's easier for me to adapt. And I found that a lot of the people I worked with understood that too. I had one client who was diabetic, and he could not accept that he had to adjust his diet and do his sugar. He had to have the doctor explain to him the science behind it.
Oh.
And so that really stuck with me. That was before I wrote the book. And that really stuck with me, is that might be pretty effective.
I kept thinking of the smartwatches that monitor your heart rate and the connection between your respiration, obviously the inhale, exhale, and then being able to monitor that with the heart rate. And, as one goes up, obviously the heart rate naturally follows. Those two are, forever connected. I don't know that people necessarily made that connection, but as I was reading that section, I couldn't help think of that. And then yesterday afternoon, ironically, I thought there sometimes these things are just simply that ironic. I had a gentleman that reached out to me and said, hey, will you talk to this young entrepreneur? She's a nutrition coach, part of SCORE, which is a group that I'm involved in, and obviously advocating for, better lifestyle, better health. And she approached it strictly from the nutrition standpoint. But, as I was reading the book, I couldn't help but chuckle and laugh at how the things connected with one another and how people are taking a different approach to your word, right? Mindfulness.
And I feel like I will use this with clients when I recommend the deep breathing and the awareness. And you talk about giving presentations and going into a big meeting and any preparation for a lot of things that leaders have to deal with. And that I would recommend this book to back up. I don't go into all that explanation when I'm talking with clients. So I do work with the smart ones that will want that. And the book isn't so, the book is like just thick enough to go through it. It's not intimidating. So it's very helpful.
Well, a lot of CEOs, they're on record. This is what my morning routine is. I don't know why, but people seem to be fascinated with that idea of a morning routine. And if they model their routine after, Jamie Dimon or Warren Buffett or whomever, Steve Cook or Tim Cook, rather, and they all basically have the same thing. I always wonder if they're legit or if that's, hey, this is my goal for 80% of my mornings. But they all will say, I wake up at 5 o'clock. I have an hour of exercise, then I have 30 minutes of breakfast, usually a bowl of fruit and yogurt, and it's always a healthy breakfast, irrespective of if they're
Right.
overweight or not. And then it's 2 hours. Well, the part that I think is so interesting, and then it's always 2 hours of reading. I think Jamie Dimon from I think he works for Chase, not Chase. I forget now. It doesn't matter. But he reads 5 newspapers a day, right? And the whole tie-in was the book being very health driven, very physical fitness driven. And then I was really impressed by the whole yoga piece. I'm not a yoga guy, but I'm obviously, all about fitness, whether that's walking or daylight or whatever the case may be. But, the fact that you're promoting, personal wellness, health and nutrition, and then obviously we're promoting the reading piece of it, the being self-aware and obviously consuming new and original content, and how all of those things tie back to this idea of, hey, what are the morning routines of these, top CEOs, and how does that all work? I mean, it seems to make a lot of sense.
And high performers in all fields, a lot of high performers in football and other athletics, and
Right.
a lot of fields, they do focus on their morning routine. Jamie Dimon's with Goldman, isn't he Goldman?
No, it's not Gold. I'll look it up, but yeah, just
All right.
but he's in all the. He's on the news every day
I
for
know, I read
something.
something about him earlier today.
Yeah.
Fred, I was thinking about you with the breathing part. I wondered if you'd heard about deep breathing and stuff like that before, but Margo, I appreciated your emphasis about the military. The military uses it, and the Navy SEALs, and they emphasize those different breathing techniques. So I do think that's a good place for any listener of ours to start. Oh, and I always forget to talk to the listeners. So welcome to our viewers. If you're watching, I get so excited for our conversation. If you do have a comment or question, I will pay attention now. And so feel free to chime in and on LinkedIn and leave a comment. And if we miss you while we're on live, then I'll keep my eyes peeled, and we'll try to answer any questions later. My comment was about the military using deep breathing. And Brett, if that stood out to you, or Margo, if you had anything else to add about that.
Well, it does. I mean, when we're doing small arms fire, or we're doing weapons training, breath control, and it doesn't apply just to military, but anybody that's into shooting, controlling your breathing is a key component of being a well-trained and let's say a high-performing marksman. I just Googled it. He's with Chase, JP Morgan Chase.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Margo? Yeah, I spent, I was aware of the breath work before as part of from mine, and I think I tell the story, I don't know if I do or not, in the book, about how I seem to have had a lot of accidents in my life, but I had a motor, we were talking about my head-on car collision earlier, and I had a motorcycle accident. I don't recall if it got it to the book or not. And after the motorcycle accident, I was afraid to get back on the bike. And my husband and I had, it was really a large part of who we were and what we did. And so when it was time to take our next big trip after that, I told him, I don't know if I'll be able to do it or not, but I have a credit card, I can fly home. And so it was interesting. And this was where I really started putting it together, is how it can affect you in everyday life, because I understood the power of the breath in the yoga studio. I understood how that helped me to get deeper into poses and such. And as we were riding the motorcycle and we would go around a curve, particularly in the way that the accident happened, I found myself just tensing up. And I realized, what do I know? I know this. And what I would do then is when we would go into the curve, I would just, and it was fascinating. After a few times of doing that, I really was much more calm, and I was able to do the whole 2 or 3 week trip. So then when I got back in the office later, I thought, that really worked on the back of the bike. I bet it would work here too. So understanding that when you let go, you're telling your autonomic nervous system, I'm okay. It's safe. Just relax. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of breathing. And the power of it. So.
I had a similar experience, and when I was hit by a drunk driver too. And you did share that motorcycle example in your book.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was hit by a drunk driver, and I had to drive the next day, or I felt like I wouldn't drive again. So I made sure
yeah.
that I drove the next day to what I needed to do. And so the
Yeah.
mind over matter, but there, you know, that the
Mhm.
body is that the mind, body, and breath, that is a whole combination, how they go
Yeah.
together. And
Yeah.
yeah, very powerful.
So you mentioned the breathing in the moment when you're on the back of the motorcycle, and as you were sharing that story, I was thinking of the body part of the book where you go through all the different yoga poses, and so many of them you said, hey, you can do this on the edge of your chair, you can do this in your office. You know, you don't necessarily, and that as I'm not a yoga person, but I mean, who can't appreciate the value of stretching, right? Just getting your blood circulation, or maybe getting a change of environment. You know, we've all heard the recommendation, hey, just take a walk around the building, take a walk around the parking lot. And that, I thought that was very, very impressive how that was put together. And it applies to everybody, right? I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a yoga mat and a hot yoga studio and all of that to get a lot of benefit from that body section of the book.
Right. And with the body, it really is about moving it, not in the way that you typically do.
Mhm.
So even if you're a great athlete and you are a bicyclist, well, when your hips get very tight, so you need to move differently. But the bigger thing too there with that is the nervous system that you're not seeing. The body is not just the bones and muscles and heart rate. It's that autonomic nervous system that's sending messages. And if you walk, they always say, oh, if you have your arms crossed, you're defensive and so forth. Well, you're also telling your own body, I'm not safe. And your body is responding. And if you can keep the chest open and keep the spine straight, you're sending the message, it's safe here. I'm safe. And then it keeps the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the relax and renew, more active, so that you're not going to get in that fight, flight, and freeze mode that often it helps us survive, and it often gets us in trouble.
That's so funny that you mentioned that. It's a great segue. The first section of the book, I mean, literally, I think page 2, you had this use case of a CEO who was berating a VP because he was struggling with a presentation. And I flipped to the next page, and you had kind of the declamatory statement about that. And this is, was the CEO doing what I had said, was the CEO doing what I had, speaking for herself, done for so long? Was he so focused on his success that he forgot what it meant to be human? And I read that and I had to pause, and I thought, you know what, that's me. And we all need that kind of that gut check or that check-in to say, you know what, have I lost touch with what it means to be human? And then I kind of read through the rest of the book, and when I'm reading, I'm always trying to put myself in the scenario, right? So in that particular little section, I'm the CEO and saying, hey, is that me? And sometimes you end up being the victim, and sometimes you end up being the villain, right? And that one, I'm like, oh gosh, which side am I on? Am I the VP berated, or am I the CEO berating somebody? And as I kept going through that, I said, yeah, you know what? I probably lost touch with what it means to be human, and I won't go into all of that. Of course, you covered it very, very well in the book, and I'm a big fan of the definition. So I said, hey, what is Margo really talking about as it relates to mindfulness? And I grabbed your definition. What is mindfully successful? Boster, or Boster, that's your last name, notes that being mindfully successful includes acting with awareness of what you are. And that goes back to what Kelly and I talk about all the time, just simply being self-aware. And there's so many people around us that we run into, they lack self-awareness, right?
Absolutely.
They're completely oblivious to how they're impacting everybody around them. And then it goes on and are not doing and noticing the impact of yourself, again, just what you talked about, to others and the organization you serve. I thought that was really, really well done. And that was, I think, all within the first 3 pages of the book.
Yeah.
Well, Bret, you know what I commend you for is that self-awareness. Instead of you saying, oh man, I know that was Joe, that's what, and you're like, oh, geez, is that me? We
did rehearse this. This is funny that you're saying that, because my next comment to myself was, it took a long, long time, and and as I'm reading the book, I'm reflecting, and as a young person, I was probably quick to anger, had a pretty short temper, talked over people all the time, probably listened to respond rather than listening to understand, all the things that you look at people and you go, are you that tone deaf? And we're not all naturally born with those, polished skills and what you're referring to as self-awareness. So the part that really stuck with me is the whole scratch the record. And I thought, you know what, you can, and you did a very good job, I think, of really illustrating, hey, you can rewire your neurons, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not happy with yourself, right, fix it. I was tying that in my brain as I was reading it back to the Mel Robbins Let Them that Kelly and I covered a couple of months ago, right? You can reprogram the neurons the way you illustrated, scratch the record, right? Change the narrative. You have that power. You have the control. Right. Don't play the victim. Take some personal ownership and accountability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that ties in with our, we have an intention not to be the leader that does those things. And I'm not like that most of the time, but when are you like that? Heighten your self-awareness so then you can improve it and change it. Margo, what were you going to say?
The other thing is what you just said there made me think about it is, yes, it's important though to have that self-awareness without judgment, because I also talk in the book about how we're quick to judge. And then it can become, we're judging so quickly that we don't even notice when we're judging. And so my experience is when one first starts developing the self-awareness, it's hard because we have tended to judge ourselves. Like, oh man, did I really just do that in a meeting? How bad am I? I must not be. And so it takes time to be able to say, I noticed that. And now next time I will do my best to do it differently. So don't judge yourself for being who you are. The other day I did something, I wish I could remember what it was. And I said something about how I didn't respond so well. And my daughter, who's my adult daughter, who's in a similar field, and she said, that was great self-awareness there. I'm like, thanks.
The students become the teacher. Yeah.
Oh, she is definitely the teacher now.
What was the impetus to the book? I'm always fascinated by authors and saying, I woke up today and I decided it's time to write a book, and I'm sure it doesn't happen that way. And you're unique in that I've never written a book. Kelly has, and obviously you have. But I'm really, really curious to say, hey, this was the point when I knew it was time to write a book.
Yeah. I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible. I think I talk about in the book how it was always a lifetime dream of mine to write a book. I had this from 4 years old, standing in the Library of Congress. I want to get a book in here. And I think my whole life I've sort of been looking for what was the message. And it was just in the back of my mind, very unconscious. And I started coach training right after finishing a yoga teacher training. And so that was 16 years ago. And when I did that, I realized they were very similar, that what it teaches about acceptance and more than one right way. And I recognized how parallel they were, but I didn't have the confidence to actually try to integrate it. And then as I was coaching leaders, and I coach impressive leaders, I mean, they are so impressive and so achieved and so successful. And I found that they had the same stories in them that I had in me, those same questionings and self-doubts and everything. And I realized I do have a message to share. And I also realized I can't coach every person, And so I want to be able to share beyond the people I had direct reach with this, how we can be more mindfully successful instead of successfully exhausted. That mindfulness is not something that happens on the mat or some woo-woo thing. It really, it shifts who you are, how you lead, and the impact on everyone around you. And so I got serious and said, start jotting it out. And then I spent time bringing together the research that I had and working with an amazing editor and created the book.
as you were speaking, I was thinking of my engagement yesterday with this young entrepreneur, the health and wellness nutrition coach, and she opened by saying, "Hey, how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, I feel fine." She said, "Do you have any aches? Do you have any pains? Do you sleep well?" I said, "No, no, no, and yes." And she looked at me as if I'm deer in the headlights, and she said, "You are an anomaly." She said, "Literally everybody that I talk to, they're not sleeping well. They have an ache or a pain, or they have this or that." And I said, "Well, I don't check those boxes." And I'm interested. I'm very curious to hear it from your perspective. Hey, Brett, yeah, everybody's got some aches and pains, and people aren't sleeping well, and they have anxiety, and the brain, the body, and the breath are, one of the possible remedies to fixing that.
Yeah. And I think it's, as you were talking, I'm thinking about sort of this misnomer that a lot of people have, is that if you ascribe to be mindfully successful, or if you are working towards it, that somehow you walk around in this Zen state like the Dalai Lama or the Buddhists who are on their peace march. No, you have those same challenges. You're simply aware of them and you respond differently. My husband and I were recently driving in Costa Rica, and I hate his driving, and the roads were very curvy. And and
have you talked to my wife?
We're like that. And at one point he said, "You should practice what you preach. Breathe." And I said, "Honey, you don't want to know what I'd be like if I wasn't breathing right now."
This is me doing the things.
That's hilarious.
So it's not about being flawless. It's not about being perfect, but it is about when you are imperfect, you recognize, that's where I was today. And
I think this is our 45th broadcast. I don't think I've laughed this much in any one of them that we've done. This is more of a comedy show today.
Yeah.
Oh, this is funny.
But I hope you mean that in the kindest of ways.
People tune in for this educational 45-minute chat, and today it's like a comedy show.
Okay, Brett, can you unpack that a little bit?
If you're not laughing, you're not having fun. Boy, I'm telling you what, I'm laughing.
That's right, and I love having fun. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So.
Okay.
But I think
that the other questions.
The awareness of it, though, you give, then it's not enough just to say like, okay, well, I just wasn't that great today. I'll do better tomorrow. Like, no, there's literally things you can do to be better tomorrow, or to be better later today. Or, it's 4:30 right now in Kansas City, and people wrapping up their day, and they're going to go home. And then how are you going to be at home, or, go from your home office to the rest of your life? And, you can do things to make that transition on purpose. To make that intentional. So that's what your book provides, I think. And you say, unlock the power. There's power in the body, breath, and the brain, body, and breath.
Well, I believe that there are fundamentals and there are absolutes, and so much of what's here in the book, these things aren't going to change. They were true 50 years ago. They're true today. They're going to be true 50 years from now. And I read this one time. There's a thing called the CRO. I don't think that position actually exists, but it was a euphemism in a book. The CRO being the chief repeating officer. And the point was that good executives, in your case, mindfully successful leaders, they repeat the same things. Their message really doesn't change from year to year. They adapt to the times, they adapt to the environment, they adapt to their surroundings, but fundamentally the message doesn't change. And I think that's what's really solid about this book is hey, we're promoting fundamentals, and you can choose, again, to Kelly's point, you can be self-aware. You have the power, you have the control to either adopt some of these techniques, the stretching, the breathing, rewiring, the scratching of the record, or not. But if you intend, if you aspire, if you desire to be a mindfully successful leader and have a mindfully successful life, here's some great tips. These are treasures. This is a roadmap. They'll at least get you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important for people to have grace with themselves and realize it's a long process. It's not going to one day you wake up and say, this is it. I'm going to become mindfully successful. I tell my leaders a lot of times, they say, how do we start? And I say 6 minutes a day, 3 minutes in the morning when you pull into work, or if they're working from home, take 3 minutes, set your timer. We all have little timers, and just breathe for 3 minutes. And at the end of the day, when you go home, before you make that transition, 3 minutes.
Yes.
And yes, many times they look at me like, really? I said, just try it. Just try it, and we'll talk about it when we meet next. And it's amazing. And then that 3 minutes can become 5, which can become 15. And it's really about that. You were talking about the routines in the morning. You know, they don't have to be a 30, 45-minute meditation. It can be a 3 to 5 minute reset. So
I'm a big proponent of that. And my last corporate role, I was on the C-suite, and would at the end of the day, I walk to my car, and I'd stand at the door as I walked in. In the morning I had a routine, then at the end of the day had a routine. But then in my car, I'd turn on the engine, and I would literally look to see if any coworkers were in my car with me. Is there anyone in the passenger seat? I'd look in the back seat. They're not coming home with me. They're not part of my evening conversations with my husband. They're not coming to bed with us. Like, you know, so that just the literal looking was probably.
And that was your way of separating your time outside of work from work?
Right.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of great people that I worked with, but they still weren't coming home into our house.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of debate about that in where you're going. I think, Kelly's that discussion about work-life balance. And there's so much of that right now. Kevin O'Leary was just online the other day talking about his time at Apple and working with Steve Jobs. And, you know, he calls it signal versus noise. And he made the comment, and I don't know Elon Musk, so don't take it the wrong way, but he said Elon Musk is 100% signal and 0 noise. And then he used, you know, what happened at Twitter and how he, you know, laid off 80% of the staff because that was in his definition of noise. Now, I don't think the average person or even the above average person necessarily aspires to be 100% signal, but he advocated that the average people, got people that, you know, top of the bell curve, 50 percentile, are 50% signal, 50% noise. And if you want to be a mindfully successful leader in this example, or even be in the upper quartile, obviously you have to tip the balance between signal and noise, more to signal and less noise.
Right. And that's interesting about who Kevin O'Leary and him and Elon Musk, and judging what is signal and what is noise. And it depends on who you are and what you judge and what you value in your life. And
couldn't agree more.
I don't think that I would be the same as how I view my time and my life and people and decision making as Elon Musk. Or
and rightly so, right?
Yeah.
And he's one that you think about, you know, when you talk about aware of the impact that you're having on yourself and others.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of the times people, and the Michael, who I called him Michael in the book, you know, he was not of the wealth category of Elon Musk, but he was single focused. His job was to make money for that company, for it to sell for $1 billion. That was it. And he was successful. All
signal. That's what Kevin O'Leary would say. All signal, 100% signal.
Yeah, he was all signal, and it was painful for him.
Well, was it healthy?
No.
Yeah.
No.
My mother's now retired, and she was an executive she was an executive assistant for an executive at a bank. And she told me all kinds of stories about him. You know, he always traveled first class, and he would get a plane ticket 24 hours and paid, you know, way too much for a plane ticket. But I believe she told me, I think he was divorced 3 times and now dating, you know, a lady. But, you know, obviously his personal life was just complete shambles. But from the outside looking in, he had all the accoutrements of success, you know, the title, you know, all of the additional benefits that go along with that. So you can definitely leave some collateral damage behind you if you're not careful. There's no question about it. So, curious question. You told us how you went into writing the book. Was there a specific audience? I mean, were you speaking to executives? Were you speaking to people in general? Were you speaking to, you know, Gen Z, the boomers? Who exactly did you feel was the ideal audience for the book? I'm curious.
And well, that's a great question. And the ideal audience to me were the executives, the people who were successful, who, and I guess I was thinking about the people I coached, you know, those executives who had achieved success, and but they were tired or they weren't sleeping. And I didn't want to talk about how do you delegate? How do you do this? How do you do your strategic plan? They knew that stuff.
Right.
And so I really focused it on the executives. Now I have two follow-on stories with that, if I may. In the book, in the integration chapter, I talk about Chris. And Chris is a real person. And of course, I had to change everything.
Sure.
So you wouldn't know who he is. Well, apparently I didn't change enough, or he recognized himself. He called me after reading the book. And he said, I really loved your book, and on and on. He said, but there was one part, you know, that Chris guy at the end was a little suspect. I was like, oh, did you recognize him?
Oh, no.
But what he said, no, he was fine. He was fine, because he really is. He is that person. And I know there were a few things, like when he said his boss had said this and stuff, and I felt comfortable. But what he said, you know, you were asking who was my intended audience, and he said, this is really great, but you know who needs this are those new managers, those people who are just going into direct, so they don't have to get at the end and be in so much pain. And I was like,
wow.
Okay. And then, and I have to make a plug for my workbook, then my daughter, who's in her 40s and is a very successful professional, she said, you know, Mom, we need to develop a workbook that people can walk through it. And I think who really needs this are those new managers and directors, so that they don't get to the end. And so I said, okay. So she and I worked on the workbook, which is not your typical workbook. It has a lot of pretty colors in it. And so the answer to the question is, who is it written for? I had the senior leaders, those executives in mind, the ones who were successful. And that was particularly why I did the audiobook, because all of my leaders say, I don't have time to read a book. It has to be on audio. And so that's why I made certain to do an audio book that came out at the same time as the print book.
So I have two comments there. One, you somewhat validated our why. I don't know that we've talked about it, but you know, if you've seen our other podcasts, but it's to inspire leaders of tomorrow to invest in themselves today, which is that junior level executive. The second part, and I find this just fascinating, right? Everybody knows the saying, hey, it's lonely at the top. But even as lonely as at the top as it is, and we all know that it is, you know, there's those folks found value to say, you know what, Margo, you can help me. I need you. It is lonely at the top, and maybe I can't talk to the people that are on my right and left, but I can bring in somebody that's a trusted advisor like you, and I can still get a lot of value out of that relationship.
Right.
Yeah, so good. Just fixing the timer so I can show your banner. So your workbook and all kinds of resources and ways to follow you and all of that are on your website. So
Margo, they are on my website. Yes.
Boster.
Yes.
Foster. I wrote down Foster, like Foster, because I saw that in read.
That was great.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people, like Foster with a B.
Yeah. Yay. So we always ask at the end, Brett and I always talk about, would you recommend this book? And if so, who would you recommend it to? So that good question following that last one that you asked, Brett. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely would. Like I said, when I opened, this is one of those where the timing in the year, I don't know if we did this deliberately or it was just, you know, good fortune on our part, but when people, but thinking in terms of New Year's resolutions and obviously coming out of the holidays and having to reset both mentally and physically, you know, like I said, the timing of this book probably couldn't have been any better, at least for me personally. And again, is there something that's new and revolutionary and cutting edge? No, but I think this is a gut check that just says that we all need reminders. And it's funny how, you know, we need to be told the same message again and again and again. And I think this is very, very well done. I commented to myself as I was preparing, right? I'm not one of those mechanical people or engineering people that can probably appreciate all the physiology that's in there. I'm not a doctor, but it all made sense once I got into that. And to your point, so many of the people that you talk to said, you know, I want to understand the why behind why I feel this way. And there's probably a reason, but obviously the book does a great job of illustrating the why.
Thank you.
Yeah, I felt the same. And I was thinking that I would want my clients who sound like they're similar to yours as well, Margo, that I would want them to read it. But when you just said about the the managers on their way up, that makes so much sense for them to read this too. And then they don't have to they don't have to fix the angst and the disconnect. It'll be integrated earlier for them. I think that's fantastic. So I teach.
Well, and back to the scratch the record. Yeah, back to the scratch the record. I mean, if you're a young executive and things aren't going the way you want, you're not getting the responses, or maybe you're getting negative feedback from, the Margos, you don't have to beat yourself up. But you know what? It calls out, and I think it reinforces you have the power to make those changes. You can rewire those neurons, right? You can change that path. And I think that's the whole self-awareness and accountability, personal accountability. I mean, so many people, and we've all heard this, right? Hey, I'm a victim of how I was raised. I came from a broken family. So what? And that's really how I feel about it. So what? Take personal ownership, be aware, have accountability. You can't blame everything on your parents. Man up. Here we go.
And that, how often I say, we are not here. I do not believe we are here on this earth to be miserable. I believe we are here to have an extraordinary experience together. So if you have that misery, confusion, all these negative things for too long, there's something you can do about that. We are made to do something about that. And I appreciate you, Margo, providing the support. I feel like this is proof that we can do something about that. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
And communicating it in a way that regular people can understand. And then there's so many specific practices and tips, and even the photographs of the different movements for breath and body work. So I thought that the photographs blew me away. She even put photographs in there. So we could do a
picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you both. And I appreciate you sharing, letting more people know about the book, because it is, I feel that it can really help a number of people. And, for those rising leaders, they might be also focusing so much on how to do things. But if they had this, and they're picking up one nugget at a time, and maybe, I think you mentioned that sometimes you'll go back and pick up a book later and read it. This could be one that maybe a year or so from now they read it and say, oh, now I'm ready to hear this piece.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, this would be one of those where you pull it every year on New Year's. That's kind of, I'm a big advocate of having a New Year's Day routine, and I could definitely see where this would fall into that category.
Do you have a book that you look at every day on New Year's? I mean, every year on New Year's? Do you have one?
I go through my personal budget, my personal plan. I've got my 5 pillars, and every year on New Year's, and just like clockwork, I'll pull out my plan and I'll ask myself, how did I do? Did I hit my goals and objectives? And then I do the same thing for the next year. And obviously my girls are in their 20s and I'm training them. So my youngest daughter, everybody knows, is a CP and accountant. So she said, Dad, can I operate on a fiscal year? And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, I can't possibly do this on January. I have to do it in July. And I said, well, I tell you, and we always spend July 4th together. So I said, well, I want your accountability report on July 4th. So
there you go.
And believe it or not, she said, I see the value in this. And obviously, they see, hey, they see what I produce and what I've done. And so, they're following in those footsteps.
That's awesome.
We can get to it, but you asked about, New Year's. My wife is spending the month of January in Florida. So I'm talking about going all in on reading. I think I've read 4 books, Kelly. So, I mean, it's almost like going on my own little version of a sabbatical, but I've been all in on I even made a comment. I think I'll have read 1,000 pages in January. I usually get through, 2-3 books, which is about 600 pages in a month.
Yeah.
But I've really taken advantage of this
with
time.
Another 10 days left. That's pretty good.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
It's what happens when your wife's not there to criticize your driving, huh?
I hopefully she doesn't watch this episode.
and we know who's probably right in that situation.
Exactly.
They both think they are.
Well, thank you both. Brett, thank you. A great way to kick off 2026. Everybody, we're going to be a week earlier next month. We will be on February 19th. And the author is joining us next month also, Mark Mears. And I don't have the book right in front of me, but Love at Work. So more information about that coming soon. So thank you so much, Margo. Thanks for spending your time with us today. And thank you, everybody who watched. I saw a couple comments and much appreciated. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank
And
you.
thank you both. Bye.